Okay, I was going to do a video. I think the last video I did covered up to version 25, and we're now on 33. So I've got a few things to go through. As usual, I've cut out all of the bugs, or the bulk of the bugs at any rate, and I'll actually focus purely on changes which are enhancements. So starting with the oldest first, we'll pick up play speeds. I'm not going to go through everything in excruciating detail. In some cases, I'll refer to some other videos. The play speeds change is up here on the audio menu. You've always been able to play the video at 3/4, a half speed and a quarter speed, which was obviously useful when you were just trying to get those timing marks just right, or you were doing your Papagayo and you wanted to get it right. But sometimes you might want to actually speed it up. So there's now some speed up elements. Now, just as the slowdown tended to deepen the sound, the speed ups have exactly the opposite effect. They tend to lift the pitch, and in doing so, obviously it runs through the sequence a lot quicker. So if you just want to see a quick run through and make sure it all looks okay, you can now play it through at a slightly faster speed and save yourself a few microseconds or something along the way. Optional play controls to the house preview. So basically how this works is, actually there's a couple of features here. So if let's put the right window up. If you've got your house preview up and docked, nothing changes, right? It's all the usual. You can play and stop up here. Everything's normal. Sorry, it disappeared again. And it disappeared then because there's now this option. Where is it? Where's the option? There's an option down here to auto show the house preview. And there's also an option to turn on play controls on the preview. So these are two new options. They'll be off by default. The auto show on house preview. So if I turn that off, it's all normal. It plays. There's no effects. Nothing happens. It's all normal. If I come up and turn on auto show and I hide the house, now when I press play, what happens is the house appears and shows. And so if you're like me and you tend to work on a laptop, I can have my house here, and you can see here the play controls. And when I press stop, it disappears. And when I come up here and press play, the house preview reappears. And you now have play controls here. So you can pause and play. You can jump back and jump forward. Well, you can jump forward only. Oh, you can jump forward while it's playing, or jump back. And when it gets to the end again, it disappears. So probably a little bit more useful when there's music. It's a little bit more flexible when there's music. When there's music, you can actually drag this thing around, and that works properly. It doesn't work so well with animations. But so some play controls down here. And the ability to auto hide it. If you don't like the play controls, go back to settings and get rid of the play controls, and it goes back to how it always was in the past. So all good. So that's that one. AC shortcut. Okay, so this is when you have the AC toolbar, as you run your mouse over these, you can see there's a shortcut key. So when you're in AC mode and you're down here and you press a key like the O key, it puts the on effect. In the past, you could press the T key and it would put a twinkle. That's now been changed to the K key. And the reason for that is obviously you want to be able to press the T key and put a timing track in up here, and having that as a T down there was breaking that. So that was changed. The Falcon upload. The Falcon upload has been fixed and implemented a number of times over the last few releases. As of right now, pretty much all bar one defect, which is an extremely rare defect, and it only occurs when your Falcon controller is in somewhat of a screwed up mode. Everything I know of is fixed. It now will report errors and not upload if there is anything even slightly hinky in the way in which you've done your setup. And there's also some additional checks in check sequence which will highlight the sorts of anomalies that will cause you problems. In any way, it will not upload to the Falcon unless it's entirely happy that it's going to work. So the Falcon upload's pretty solid right now. Output frame deduplication. Okay, so this is interesting. Probably only useful in a handful of circumstances. Up here, you'll see there's now this suppress duplicates column over here. And if you open up the controller, there, in this case, there's a checkbox there on an E31. It's there as well. What this will do is it will force, what xLights will do is when it comes time to send the data to the controller, it will actually compare the data that it's about to send to the controller to the last packet that it tried to send. And if that packet hasn't changed at all, xLights actually won't send the packet. And so this can reduce the number of packets that are flowing across your network. Now, for the vast majority of people, I would not turn this on, but there are a couple of situations where it can help. One is if you're using a very low-end controllers. These ones here happen to be Ethernet attached Arduinos. They're extremely low-end. If I have more than 2 packets arrive at once, basically these things will start to drop packets. And so deduplicating packets is actually a kind of a good way to make these things more stable. If you're also running a reasonable number of Wi-Fi attached controllers, you also may want to consider deduplicating the packages and trying to reduce the number of packets which are landing on each of your controllers. And probably the only other case would be if you were running an extremely large show and starting to run into networking issues. Again, this might help. If you do turn on duplication suppression, xSchedule will also respect that and will also deduplicate. Now, there is a setting that goes with this, which is the duplicate frames to suppress. And if you're doing duplicate frame suppression, you need to come in here and choose a value here as well. And the reason you have to do that is because you still want to send a key frame every now and then, just to make sure that if there's been a long period of time with no packets being sent, you still want to make sure that a packet does occasionally arrive. And by setting this to 20, effectively this means that once a second, a packet will still be delivered to the controller. It just will drop 19 of them. If you set it to none, that's effectively going to turn off duplicate suppression, because it's basically going to send the packet every time as a key frame. So that's suppress duplicates. Add LMS timing import. You've always been able to import LMS or law timings, and you could do that here, where you could do an import timing track, and one of the options that you could choose was from a law file. What's changed here is in the import effects. When you import an xLights sequence, you're always able to choose the sorry. Yeah, there's an LMS here. You're always able to choose them from an xLights sequence. This one doesn't happen to have any. But now what would happen is there would be a list up here of any timing tracks that were in that LMS file that you could bring in. You can't bring in fixed timing tracks like 50 milliseconds or whatever. You can always easily go and create those in xLights. But if you've created a customized timing track in LOR, that will now appear up here, and you can bring those in that way. So 2 ways to bring those in now. I'll skip that one because we kind of already shown that. Tagging start channels. What this is there are many ways in which you can screw up the way you define your start channels. So if I was to come in here and, I don't know, make this output 4,000, which doesn't actually exist, not only will I get an error saying, hey, I couldn't calculate that, but it will now highlight any of these start channels with these 3 stars in front of it. And that's just telling you that, hey, when I tried to evaluate that start channel, I got an error. And you can see it's defaulted to 1, which is obviously not meant to be right. And so, yeah, so if you look down this list and you see any start channels with 3 stars in front of it, that tells you that, hey, that didn't work. There's an error with that start channel. It's not going to be correct. And obviously, check sequence will tell you that as well. Make master capability to display elements. Oh, okay. Okay, so what this one here is a little funky as well. So here I've created a sequence. It's got all my models in it, as you would normally see when you create a sequence. But let's say that actually I've got another one of these views. This default sequencing one sounds like a good one. And you can see that it doesn't have everything. There's a whole bunch of models over here which I've left out. But when you look at my master view, all the models are in my master view. And so this default sequencing thing is actually the one I want to be my master view. So now what I can do is I can come up here and click on Make Master. And now my master view is a copy of that view. And so you've always been able to do this at the time when you created a new sequence. You could choose one of your views and say, make that my list of models. Now you can come in here and take any one of these views and turn it into the master view. As simple as that, one click. So that's that one. Optional auto hide show of the house preview, so we've already seen that. The ability to extract phonemes from the imported single channel face data. Now I actually made a video on this, and so I'm not going to go back through it, but as ever you go to videos.xlights.org, which is probably where you're watching this video right now. There was a video I made not so long ago back here, 17 minutes, where generate lyrics from channel data in xLights, where I walk through an example of how to do that. It's a little bit involved to set up and everything else, but if you've got some old, I don't know, Vixen 2 sequences, or maybe a law sequence where you had some 8-channel singing face models, and you want to bring that data in, but you actually want to bring it in as a lyric track so that you can maybe put it onto a matrix singing face, etc., etc. That video goes through how you would go about achieving that using that new feature. Wiring views for inbuilt models. You've been able to do wiring views for models for some time now. Couple of things, however, have changed. So one is that if I can get to my model, I can now get to the wiring view directly from the preview and bring it up. You can now also do a number of things here. So you can flip it from front view to rear view. Now you haven't been able to do that in the past. You can also change it to a light background, which is a little bit better for printing. You've always been able to change the font size, so you can shrink that down if that's what you need. And now you can actually print it directly from here. And so if you do that, it should bring up the print dialog. It's waiting, there it is. And so now you can print this directly to the printer rather than having to save it to disk and print it in your photo printing app. So a bunch of changes there, but also I can take my built-in models. So here's an arches model. I can see the wiring view. There's my wiring view of my arches. I can take my flat megatree. Oh, there's a lot of channels on my flat megatree. My screen's not big enough that you're going to be able to discern those numbers, but they're all there, all listed out. Maybe more useful, here's a spiral tree. Again, nice and neatly laid out so you can see where everything is. So there are some models that you still can't support. It's probably better or more useful for something like a star, where you can now see exactly how xLights expects the pixels to be laid out. There are some models that it doesn't work for. You won't be able to do it for a polyline. It just was too hard, didn't make a lot of sense. It also doesn't work for things like DMX and the like, but for the vast majority of them, you can now get that wiring view. So yeah, the wiring view from the front we talked about. Row heading tooltips. Okay, so this was a point of annoyance. So if you've got some model names that are extremely long, do I have any? Oh, there's one there. Now, if you come over it, it actually pops up and shows you the full name. So if you happen to have a root, because we've never made this resizable, it's one of those things that's long been on my to-do list. But it's not a trivial thing to do, so it's not going to happen this year. But now if you come to one of these models which have got a really long name, you'll get a tooltip which shows you the full name. So if you've hidden the color or something way over here to the right and you're frustrated, you're not sure which one it is, it's now pretty easy. And we don't clutter things up. We only show the tooltips when we absolutely need to. So something like this is going to show, but the one above it's not going to show because it's quite clear what it is. So that's that one. Model locking. This is a godsend. I don't know about you, but I've got things here, one on top of another, and I will click on things and accidentally move things. And so now when I'm clicking on these models, you see that it's got a red outline. So if I click on this model and drag it, nothing happens. If I come up to these sizing bars, I can't grab them and size anything. Right? These things are all locked into place. Which means I don't accidentally move things around. Now I can still change all the other properties. The only thing I can't do is resize or move things or rotate things. That also doesn't work. Now not everything has to be locked. This thing here is not locked, so I can still move this thing around if I want to. So I get to choose which things I want to lock. When you want to lock them, just right click and lock. If you want to lock your whole display, just select your whole display, right click, lock. Everything's now locked in place. Okay, and then of course you can unlock things on an individual basis if that's what you want to do. So I think that's pretty useful. Phoneme track from the channel though, it's a repeat, I've done that, talked about that. xSchedule playlist item which can write information about the current song to a file. Okay, so this one, I'll fire up the scheduler. Quickly add a playlist, give it a name. I need to go into advanced mode because we're going to add an advanced playlist item. So there's now this add file item. And basically what it lets you do is specify a file name. And so the most common reason to do this would be create a text file that maybe your RDM unit picks up and sends the name of the current song. If you hold the mouse over here, you'll get a whole bunch of list of things that you can do. So if you want to show the title of the song from the MP3 file, you could type in here, title, and when this playlist step kicks off, it will actually create this file and write the title of whatever song is in this current step to the file. The playlist step name is probably the one I would most commonly use, but you can also hard code any text you want in here as well, and that will all get written out literally to the file. And you would typically set the delay to 0 so that it happens at the very beginning of the step so that your FM broadcaster can tell people in their car what song they're listening to, I guess. If that's what you're interested in. So that's what that one's about. The ability to import LAS files. Look, this was just an anomaly, I think, at the end of the day. In the sequencer here, you've always been able to import things, and LMS files are obviously something you've been able to import. For some reason, we left the LOR animation sequences off the list here, and so that's just been added back in so that anyone who has those sequences can bring them in that way. And custom model renumber. So a new guy, Scott, who's been putting a couple of things in and suggesting some changes and then coding them up. He's actually gone and put in a change on our custom model dialog. Come on, give me a click. What's it doing? grab one of these. There we are, got one. Okay, so what he's done is, here's a very messy model. Doesn't look like anything at all. But let's imagine it turns out that I've slightly got this wrong and I need to move all of my 1 to become, where my 2 is I want 1 to be, and where 3 is I want 2 to be, and so forth. So I want to shift all the numbers. He's now created this renumber option. And basically I can either add 1 to every node, and when it gets to the end it will actually rotate it around, and so the last pixel in this model is pixel 100, and so if I increase everything by 1, then 100, which was here, now becomes 1, 99 became 100, 98 became 99, and so forth. So it's basically shifted everything along slightly. This creates some really interesting possibilities. If you've wired a star up, you can now export it as a custom model, bring the custom model in, and then slightly renumber it by shifting all the pixels around, and potentially you don't have to go through and click on every pixel and change everything. So that's what that one's about. Control left and right arrow and shift left and everything else. So again, there's a video on this one. There's this video I did here on xLights sequence and navigation shortcuts, which go in and talk about how you can very quickly, and I won't go through all of these, but basically when you've got, let's get out of AC mode. So when you're on an effect here, if you want to stretch it out to the end or stretch it back to the beginning, etc., there's now keyboard shortcuts that let you do things like that, which can make, so yeah, dropping an effect that goes across the whole sequence is really literally as simple as drop the effect, Control Shift right arrow, Control Shift left arrow a couple of times, and it's done. And it's across the whole sequence, and you know it ends at the right time. But that video that I was pointing to there, the navigation shortcuts, goes through that in quite a bit of detail. Within that, there is also the ability for you to, so here we are on Snowflake 4, I can press Control dot, and then I can move elsewhere in my sequence over to here, and if I hit Control slash, it jumps right back to where I was. So it lets you sort of mark your position, go off somewhere else in the sequence, and then jump right back. So it can be useful if you're going off and grabbing some effects to copy from somewhere else in your sequence, and then you want to jump back to where you were when you started. So that's kind of useful as well. Optimize loading of test presets. So that was Dan made some optimization so things load a little bit quicker. Built-in bitmap fonts to match Superstar. So Gil's made some enhancements to the text effect. Although Gil's Superstar import is absolutely awesome and I use it all the time, Gil was struggling with some of the Superstar fonts. And so he's now built in a whole bunch of fonts which are much closer to the original Superstar fonts. And that enables a couple of things. One is obviously it enables us to more accurately match the Superstar sequences when we bring them in. But two, if you're working with some very low resolution items and you want to put text on them, you'll find some of these fonts actually look a lot better than the operating system fonts that we've historically used, and so you can go in and use those now. Tags on the right click on the timeline. I think I demoed this as well. Basically, okay, let's stop that. So basically, you can now come up to the timeline, just to the top part of the timeline here, and you can insert a tag. You have 10 of them that you can insert. And you can move them around by choosing the same number multiple times. And so it just puts these timing mark tags in, and it doesn't matter where you are in the sequence, it doesn't matter how drilled in you are. If you press Control and one of those numbers, it jumps to and moves that timing mark right to the edge here. So there's number 6, right, at 1.8 or 1.9. If I press Control 6, 1.9 is at the bottom, the right left. Press Control 8, it jumps to the 8. I think 0 was the other one I dropped, press Control 0, and it jumps there. So a very quick way to scroll across the timeline by just setting up to 10 of these timing mark tags here, and then you can use the keyboard to jump left and right within the sequence. The other one I added was Control Shift and the numbers. So if you want to go 10% into the song, you press Control Shift 1, 20% Control Shift 2, 30% Control Shift 3, all the way up to 90% Control Shift 9. So again, a very quick way. So you want to go back to 10%. If you want to go to the 0 point, of course you hit the home key, and if you want to go to the end, you hit the end key. Although that, I think that also jumps as well, but the home key definitely does. All right, we've talked about that. A splash screen, you've all seen the splash screen when xLights loaded, so Kevin generously gave me that. X and Y rotations on RotatoZoom. Okay, so let's go to our matrix, because the RotatoZoom always looks better on your matrix. Let's throw a bars effect up, give it a bit of color. So in RotatoZoom, you've always been able to rotate your model in this direction here. So now there are some additional rotation points, or some rotations down here. Come on. It's not sizing perfectly. So now you can actually do an X rotation as well. So an X rotation is a rotation on the using a point on the X-axis. It would help if I had something that was asymmetrical. So let's throw the butterfly down there. So when I do the X rotation, you'll see that it's basically compressing itself and then it reverses itself. You can also change whereabouts it rotates from. So here I've moved the rotation point over to the right. So effectively you are flipping it horizontally, and of course there's a Y rotation which flips it vertically as well. So that sounds all well and good, but where would you use that? Well, a great place to use that would be with the text effect. So we can throw in hello, and we can give it a Y rotation. We'll give it a simple ramp. And so I think we need to move to one of those thin fonts, maybe a little bit bigger. But basically you get what I mean. It's basically rotating the model, in this case, around a point on the Y-axis in and out of the screen. Add display of the actual time. Oh, okay, into value curve dialog. So let's go back to this value curve dialog. So we've got an effect here that basically runs, I don't know, for 4.550 seconds. And now when you come up to here and you move the mouse over here, it actually tells you how far into that effect it is. So in this case, you know, we're currently 3.1776 seconds in, or 70% of the way through this effect, and the value is being set to here 232.6 as the number of degrees of rotation. So of course that affects at the beginning, but the time that you see in this case is actually the real time within the sequence. So because this particular effect starts at 3.35 seconds in, we're getting 3.35 seconds in. So hopefully it will let you be a little bit more precise if you want to come in here and create a custom curve. And the same thing applies on color curves. Again, if you're up here, I think, why is it not there? Okay, I lie. Could have sworn there was a tooltip that showed you what the time was. All right, I have to fix that. It's meant to at any rate. Okay. Printing of the wiring view, we've already covered that. Swap the start and end points to the morph effect. Okay, so you're all by now familiar with the morph effect and Gill's. Bring this up a bit. Obviously, there's a quick set, so we'll do a morph up. Sorry, a full sweep up. Full sweep up. All right. So basically, he's created, I think it's on the options, to swap the start and finish point. So if you just want to swap a morph around so it goes in the opposite direction. Now, when you're doing just a sweep up and a sweep down, that's kind of neither here nor there, right? But let's imagine you played with this thing and you wanted to, sorry, now, let me go back. Let's do a sweep to the left. Okay. And let's make it go up like that and down like that. So that's great. So it's sweeping across on an angle, but now I want it to sweep back down again. And so I can just swap the points and the morph effect goes in the reverse direction. So just a quick way to rapidly switch your morph effects around. Remembering custom colors in the color selection dialog. Okay, so we obviously have always had the ability for you to over here to save your color palettes, but what this one relates to is these colors down here at the bottom. So if you define a custom color, sorry, if you define a custom color, oh, sorry, I have to click add. Oh, add, no. Why is it not adding? This dialog is, to be honest, a little bit on the buggy side. Okay, there it is. It's added it in now. And you click OK. And then if you come back in here, it keeps that custom color for you. So you can accumulate the custom colors here. As you just saw, this dialog it's not a dialog that we've written. It comes with WX widgets and it is a little on the buggy side. At least it is on Windows. It may be better on other operating systems. FSCQ, so check sequence checks. So, okay, so I'll talk about these ones. So check schedule, and I'm not sure people realize it, but there's actually a tools check schedule up here that you can run, which will go and check your schedule. I've now made it to, well, I've been looking at sort of some of the challenges that people have had with getting xSchedule set up. And one thing that can happen is that you can get your FSCQ files out of date, so that your networks file, which of course describes how all the data gets sent to your controllers, is not consistent with your FSCQ files. Maybe you've added another controller or another universe and you haven't gone and re-rendered all of your sequences. Well, now xSchedule will actually go through all your FSCQ files in your sequences and it will flag any that appear to be too small, which would be an indication that you haven't actually gone back and re-rendered them. I also, in check sequence, I also added some additional checks. I check for effects on strands, submodels, and nodes. Oh, that's right. So there's always been a handful of checks that we've done on effects that you've dropped. So if you drop a picture effect and it refers to a picture that doesn't exist, we've always flagged that in check sequence. It turns out though, if you drop that picture effect down here on the strand level or on a submodel or a node, the way check sequence was working, it actually wasn't checking those. And so that's been fixed. I'd actually call that a bug. But we're also now checking for effects that shouldn't be placed onto nodes. And so let me give you a classic example of that. Let's go to a node here and let's go and grab the faces effect. Now, there is not a reason on earth why you would put a face effect onto a node. It makes no sense. Of course, xLights doesn't care. But now when you do a tools check sequence, it will flag that and say, faces effect at start time 0 on that model really shouldn't be used at the node level. Okay, and so we've gone through and looked at all of the I've looked at all of the effects here and made a call where there's an effect that makes absolutely no sense on the node level or whatever. You will now get a warning in check sequence to say that you shouldn't do that. So that's what that one's about. We're almost there. So less than a screen to go. More enhancements. So empty model groups. So if you create a model group and you don't put any models in it, and who would do that? I don't think anyone would do that deliberately, but I know over time as you edit your show from year to year, sometimes you actually end up deleting a bunch of models and you forget to go back and delete the model group. And so it will now flag any model groups which have no models left in them. It'll also flag any submodels that have no nodes in it. So in fact, I actually have those at the moment because I have not quite finished setting some of my submodels up. And so I have some submodels here that have no nodes in them, and they're flagged as errors because obviously dropping an effect on those is not going to do anything. And so that makes no sense at all, and I will need to fix that before I finish sequencing my show. And reference files outside the show directory. So I've spoken for some time about how important it is that you keep your files inside your show directory because xLights does things like automatically fix up all the paths and everything else. Well, now the check sequence is actually going to flag anytime you have an image file or something that's outside your show directory. It's going to raise a warning within xLights to say, hey, that's not best practice, not a good thing to do. Cropping to the video effect. Okay, do I have that? I think it was this one. I think this is it. No. All right, so, oh no, this is, that's Ron's layout. I can't remember now. Somewhere here there was a layout. Sorry, it had a video in it. I'm not going to be able to find it quickly. All right, doesn't matter. We'll use Ron's layout for a minute. So obviously we are able to add a matrix here. Sorry, we've got the guy with the most matrices on the planet, and I can't find his matrix model. Where's your matrix? Oh, yeah, there's a matrix there. So let's drop a video effect on it. Of course, it comes up red. Why does it come up red? It comes up red because there is no video file. So we need a video file. I don't know, did he give me any video files? No, he obviously didn't. That's okay. I do have video files in my documents, my lights, home, videos. All right, so let's pick a video here. I don't know. This one here is pretty good. All right, so what I can do now is I can actually crop it. So if I want to crop the piece on the right, I can stretch the video in and I can crop it from the left. Now, the reason I built this is someone actually had a video with 3 singing faces on it and he wanted to put each one of those singing faces onto a slightly different matrix. And so using this cropping, you're able to basically constrain which part of the video shows on a particular model. And so, yeah, that's what that's all about. xSchedule can add up as a remote. Okay, so coming soon on the Falcon is obviously the ability for you to place the FSCQ file onto an SD card onto the Falcon board and then use sync packets from the Pi to play it. Now, there are some constraints with how those sync packets work, and it doesn't actually work with the standard sync packets. You've actually got to send these special sync packets, and this was the change to enable xSchedule to support those as well. Now, those boards aren't out yet. There's a few people that have preview versions of them. But basically the way this works is there is now a unicast remote mode that you can set the scheduler into, and what you would do is you would come in here and you could add the IP address of all of your Falcon boards that are operating this way, and then you would put the scheduler into unicast. Oh, sorry, you put it in, sorry, you leave it into master mode and you would play it. It's also possible for xSchedule to actually accept those packets as well. Normally I wouldn't bother doing this. You would just use the standard remote mode. But if for some reason you're trying to sync up xSchedule with maybe another xSchedule which is running on another network segment, and you need to route the sync packets around a complicated network structure, these packets are actually routable, and so that would make it possible to run absolutely massive shows. You could easily run 10 million channels or more and have it all keep up with several computers driving it, all synced together using that capability. There's no way you could do that if you're using broadcast, because everything would be on the same network segment. And when you're running that many channels, you would definitely want to separate your network out. Check sequence checks for non-contiguous models. Okay, so basically the way this works, it's probably kind of hard to show, but effectively, if you are going to place two models onto the same Falcon output and you want to do an upload to the Falcon, you would normally daisy chain those two models together. And so let me show where I've done one of those. Sorry, I'll go back to mine again. So come on. All right. So the places where I've done that is here. So all of these mini trees here are all on WS2811.4. Okay, because they're all daisy chained together. They're all on output 4 on my Falcon controller. Now, when you do that, you would set them up with a start channel where they're all chained together. Now, of course, you don't have to do that, and I could come into here and I could do something really random, like say, oh, let's put that, so you're going to be on start channel 26,000. Now, the problem is obviously this is not a contiguous range, and so when I try to upload that to the controller, I'm going to end up with a really nonsensical set of data. Now, technically it's not wrong, and if you were to go in and use virtual strings on a Falcon controller, you absolutely could make that work. The problem is when you're doing a Falcon upload, and the only reason for you setting this controller string down here is because you were doing an upload to the Falcon, this is not going to work. And so in this circumstance, when you run check sequence, it will now, if I can find it, where are we? Got too many errors in here. Customers odd. Not seeing it now. Oh, it didn't find it. Why didn't it find it? Did I not save it? I did save it. Okay. Gonna have to look at why that didn't find it. All right. I'll have to go back and look at that one, but it should have found that one. It obviously didn't. Maybe because it's put it onto a separate controller. Yeah, that's why, because it's gone and actually put that onto a totally different controller. That's not good. I should be catching that. Oh, actually, no, I shouldn't be catching that because it's on a separate controller, so it won't pick it up. Anyway, but normally, let's imagine that this particular address range was still on the same controller. It would have flagged this as being non-contiguous, and it would have highlighted that as an error. FPP master support for Pixel Stick and Falcon, so that's basically those CSV packets I was talking about. And finally, xSchedule gamma processing. So what this is in xSchedule here, for some time now we've been talking about output processing and the ability for you to do some last minute shuffling of channel data before it goes out. Well, now what you can do is you can apply gamma at the last minute as well. So I can choose the first 1,000 nodes here, and I can say I just want to give all of those nodes a gamma of 2. And what it will do is it will apply that gamma change on all of that channel data just before sending it out. The beauty of that is you don't change it in xLights, which means your xLights screen looks orange when you put orange on, or purple when you put purple on. And when you get to xSchedule and you're playing your schedule, the data gets manipulated so it still looks good on your pixels as well. And it saves you from doing that. If you want a more complicated gamma curve, you can also set the gamma values on individual colors as well, just by turning the simple mode off, and you get that extra option. And that's it. That's just a few updates since release 25. Hopefully that filled in some gaps, explained some things that people maybe weren't sure of. And thanks for watching.